completely machinima. And now for something completely machinima. And now for something completely machinima.
Hello and welcome to And Now for Something Completely Machinima, the podcast about machinima, virtual production, and related technologies. My name's Phil Rice, and I'm here with my co-hosts, Damien Valentine.
Hello.
Tracy Harwood.
Hello.
And Ricky Grove. I'm going to insert cricket sounds there. Ricky is off this week, but we hope he'll be rejoining us very shortly. So this week we are talking about a very, very little short film that Tracy picked out for us. Tracy, why don't you tell us about
it? Yeah. Well, probably it's a good job Ricky's not here because I think we all know what his answer to this one might be. Actually, this is a GTA 5 longer short called Stolen. By Dark Frame Films, which was released actually a couple of years ago. So it's a couple of years old, this is. What attracted me to it was the synopsis of it. Because I thought it got some really cool ideas in it. I'll read this, share this bit with you because this I like this. He says, with the Rebirth Project emerged a new technology that made it possible to transfer the human mind to new receiving devices. The idea gained popularity after the appearance of the term body donor, which allowed some minds to abandon their sick body for another that accepted the exchange. John Bell is a former soldier who travels across the country in search of his daughter's stolen body, hoping to return her consciousness to its rightful place. I love that as a teaser. I really did like it. But the bit that sort of made me think, oh, are we sure, is it's 30 minutes long. And I have to say, right out bat, it feels 30 minutes long. I have to say that. But I stuck with it and yeah, I do think the ideas in it are really good. Yes, I think it could be shorter. Yes, I think, the editing, could be improved. But the central premise of it and the ideas within it, I think, are quite cleverly done. Now, let me just say this. What's the production company again? Dark Frame Films is actually a guy called Kevin Fernandez, whose nickname is Shepherd41. And he's done a couple of these kinds of films now, but I couldn't find anything after this period of time. So far as I can see, he's not done anything in the last couple of years, which, given how much effort has gone into this, I can well see that these longer projects just take too long to do, and maybe he's kind of moved on as a consequence. I couldn't really find anything too much out about him beyond the fact that this is the piece of work that he's done. Right, let me tell you about the film then. So this is really a focus on this one central character. And all the action, including all the narrative pieces, all take place around this one character, which I think is kind of interesting because this character does not actually say anything at all throughout the whole film. Not as far as I could detect, anyway. It's just the action around him, the action explaining what he is doing, and all the bits and pieces that are going on all position this character. And that struck me right from the start as being a little bit John Wickish. I don't know. Um, where fundamentally what you're looking at is the focus on the impact this character has on those around him, perhaps not so much on the character himself. And that includes, I think, ultimately the daughter character that kind of comes into the story at the end of the plot. So I thought what we'd got here was a really interesting world building approach with it. The I think the ideas immediately, particularly right at the beginning of it, immediately positions it in this kind of transhumanist sci-fi territory. You've got a clear set of references to a body which is no longer really a stable identity, but this kind of container and transferable platform. And that is where the title clearly comes from. It's kind of working on these two levels, though. One is that you've got a body that's been stolen to house the consciousness of the daughter, and the idea of something being stolen as a sort of a self persona. I think that's the bit I was really intrigued by. The Rebirth Project I felt was kind of very cyberpunk. We've actually commented before on films that are using GTA to convey cyberpunk type themes, and I'm kind of intrigued by that. We've looked at one or two where the games have been melded and merged in what's being presented, but also one or two where GTA is the standalone. And I'm guessing the reason for that is that Cyberpunk itself perhaps doesn't have the breadth of environments that can be drawn on in the same way that GTA has. Now, you guys might expand on that a little bit because I don't really know that for sure, but certainly what you see in this is both urban and rural settings being used, although I think it's mainly city-based. And yeah, I find that kind of what would you call it? Extraneous kind of world building on a GTA type environment. I think that's really kind of fascinating. There's this kind of corporate military experimental technology culture that's being referred to. And I kind of tapped into that in relation to some of the real world debates actually that we're having around AI and kind of neural interfaces and digital identity and what have you, life extension and things like biometric ownership, who owns what of your body these days is seemingly increasingly contested. Not that I think this film actually addresses any of those particularly well, but it certainly raises them and then actually really only deals with them in a more sort of, it presents the solution as being we've got to battle it out, we've got to fight it out. I think the action structure is driven by this, sort of this recovery mission, this idea of there's a body that's been stolen. We've got to defeat those controlling it, or somehow we've got to control those exploiting the technology and kind of restore the rightful consciousness in the body. And I guess therefore that what you're looking at is more of a revenge film, a part kind of rescue film, a part sort of cyberpunk kind of film. That John Wick thing definitely came through for me the more I kind of got into it. The highly kind of there were elements of it that were for me quite highly choreographed. You got this kind of quite a lot of close combat and stylized revenge and what have you. And then this ending, which was kind of intriguing. It's not really about who wins, but it's more about what makes a person themselves. And again, I thought that was a really interesting question. Perhaps not particularly well dealt with, but certainly well raised through this whole film. To me, the ending felt a little bit like because of the length of this and because of there were the fights seemed to just go on for an unnecessarily long period of time. But it almost felt to me like the creator actually changed their mind about what they wanted to achieve with it. halfway through some of the scenes of this, and that never felt clearer than right at the end. It almost felt like they had a different ending plan for it, and then in the end did something else with it. So for me, it was more, it was more the ideas and some of the execution of it than it was the whole of a story, because it definitely went on too long. I thought the editing could have been sharpened, the narrative could have been clearer throughout. I'm not suggesting, increase the add voice acting, say, for the central character, because I thought the way that that was dealt with was part of the fascination with it, really. But I really enjoyed the dark kind of electronic atmosphere of it. I liked the kind of high impact sounds that we got from it. I love the contrast between the kind of ambient tension and the combat rhythm. It's just that it took too long to play out for me. Yeah, that I suppose it led me to a set of thoughts after I sort of sat down and thought about it. This guy created a lot of his own mods when he was making this, and I think the tension that I felt in this might be because maybe this guy was trying to do too many things, which is show off the mod that he created in order to capture the content, as well as show off the content in order to demonstrate what the mod could do. And I, in the end, I felt there was a tension there about what was being covered as the focus of what was being shown. So there you go. There's a few sets of thought. I'm not saying this is a bad film at all, because I liked it generally, especially the ideas of it. I thought there were some editing problems. I thought there's some sound problems too. There's some bits that were noticeably louder than other parts of it, and some bits that just did not work in terms of the sounds matching what was going on the screen of it. But I'm kind of being nitpicky here, really. I'm really more interested in what you guys thought about it, and whether you agree or disagree. Over to you.
Right. So, Tracy, you're right about the cyberpunk thing. There are a lot of locations in Cyberpunk 2077 that would have worked perfectly for pretty much every single scene in this film, from the all the urban stuff to going outside the city. There's if in the game there's actually more outside the city than there is in the city, except most of it's
Mm,
desert. But there are little tiny settlements around that you could explore. So those would be one of those would have been perfect for like the rural outside bits. Um, and I did notice some of the character models had been taken from that game and imported into GTA 5.
mm,
Like the smuggler character that he captures towards the beginning of the film, that is one of the NPC characters that you can gang members that you can meet in Cyberpunk. And there's some clothing options. I don't know if they lifted the whole character or just took bits of clothing and just took the jacket and then put that on a GTA character or something like that. I'm not quite sure how that would work. So there are cyberpunk elements in. I also noticed some of the corporate um, soldiers had the Umbrella Corporation, so those are taken from Resident Evil. I don't know
oh,
which Resident
mm,
Evil game in particular those are from because I've not really played that many of them, but I recognize the logo, and so I know where that came from. So I think a lot of these custom bits that aren't in GTA have been taken from other games to fit that story. Um, this film could easily have been made in Cyberpunk, except for one problem, is there's no cinematic camera mode. There's a photo mode,
Right.
yes,
um,
yes,
but you can't really make a film with that. And I know we've seen that mod that has
mm,
some kind of camera controls in it, but it still doesn't let you control the characters to this kind of degree that you would
mm,
need to tell this story. So that's probably why he didn't make it with Cyberpunk. It's just visually it would look impressive. All of the locations and the character models, that's all in Cyberpunk. It's just not being able to actually get them to do what you want and move the camera the way you'd want is the
mm,
reason why it wasn't done. And which is a shame because obviously GTA is a much older game than Cyberpunk. So if he'd made this in Cyberpunk, it would look a lot more visually stunning. I mean, this did look visually stunning, especially for a GTA 5 game, given its age now.
Mm,
But if it had been made for Cyberpunk, it would look even better.
mm, mm.
Unlike you, Tracy, I didn't feel like this was a long film. I started watching it thinking, oh, this is going to take forever. And then it finished. And I thought, oh, I didn't realize half an hour had gone. I got really absorbed into it.
Oh, good.
There's a lot of story elements that, again, would feel right at home in the Cyberpunk 2077 world. Like the whole downloading the personality and swapping bodies and all of that kind of stuff. That's actually sort of one of the plot points of the game. Um, what he's done is very different from the game, but just like the general idea of immortality and transferring consciousness and stuff. Um, so, there's that. I thought it was very cinematically done. I think he made excellent use of the cinematic tools that are in GTA 5, which again made me wish that Cyberpunk had that. Um, I know I keep going about Cyberpunk, but it's just Cyberpunk's a great game, and they fixed
Mm,
up all the launch issues, but it's still missing those kind of cinematic camera tools that I think were just. If that was there, I think you'd see a huge amount of Cyberpunk Machinima. I
mm,
know we've looked at some before that's been really well done, but if those tools existed, there'd just be so much out there because there's a lot in that world to make use of. But I keep getting distracted by that. We should be talking about this film. Um, I really enjoyed it. I liked the story. I did like the way that the main character didn't say anything. I felt like that suited his story not to say anything because he just didn't have anything to say. All that he had left was his actions and what he wants to do. Even at the very end, and he's kind of resolved it to the best that he is able to do. It's not necessarily a happy ending, but it's a conclusion to his motivations. He still doesn't have anything to say because what can you say? All the story is told to the other characters that he has interactions with, or they talk to him, or they're talking to each other. But that works for this. But it's also quite tricky because we talked before about some films where they don't have a single word of dialogue at all, and just how difficult that is. So this is kind of similar in that you can't explain the main character's perspective from his lips, but you still know as the story unfolds why he's doing what he's doing. You're just getting it from other people, and I think that was really well done.
mm.
Um, uh, Tracy, you said that he hasn't really done anything else since, which is a shame because I really liked this film, and it would be nice to see more from this filmmaker. Not necessarily a sequel to this, because I don't think a sequel would work, but he's a very talented person, and it'd be nice to see more. There's one thing that let me down, which I'm sure will be no surprise from um, anyone who's had my previous comments over the last couple of months. And I didn't know this until the very end of the credits, is the voices were all AI generated. And
Yes.
I feel like, there are people out there who like to do voice acting, even just for fun, that he could approach to do this film. So I thought that's what he had done. I didn't realize they were AI generated until the very end.
Mm. Yeah.
But yeah, that's it. I enjoyed the film. It's that one niggle thing that irritated me when I saw it in the credits. But yeah, I really enjoyed this, and I can't choose my film as my favorite of the month because so this is my favorite of the month
Oh,
Why can't you?
because it makes it sound like, well, I picked this film and I hate all of yours.
no, it doesn't.
Yeah, the so that's exactly why this wasn't made in Cyberpunk is the lack of filmmaking tools and
Mm.
what makes GTA 5 so spectacular isn't just having a cinematic camera in the game, it's the ability to recam. That's what the
Yeah.
Rockstar editor really lets you do that there's not any other than GTA 4, there's not other games that are doing that. I don't know why, but it records the sequence of events and then you can go back afterwards and set the camera perfectly however you want and apply filters and do all this stuff. He made full use of that here. Um, Cinematography, I loved in this. I liked the editing, but I think I may be a little more forgiving of the editing because I'm aware of some of the limitations of Rockstar Editor, that would account for the short length of cuts generally. Like
Oh,
you only get to record a certain amount and then it moves to the next demo. And if there's a lot of action, then the demo gets shorter. Its length is determined by the density of the activity going on in the video. How many characters and cars and such are visible. So you only really get to work with it, generally speaking, in these little clips. That if there's not much going on, the clip can run a minute. If there's a lot going on, the clip can run 15 seconds, you know? So, and as he's capturing these scenes, assuming he used the Rockstar editor, I have to think that he did. So there's that limitation. And then there's also the limitation of you have to keep the camera when you're recamming. You can't venture more than a certain fixed distance from the character that recorded the demo. It just stops you, right? So those are tough confines to work in. I think all things considered, he did a really nice job on the edit. Um, Camera wise, the only thing that really just rubbed me wrong was the camera shake, because it just felt like it was just routine, patterned, that it was like a setting that had just been flipped on and forgotten about. And so every scene has the exact same camera shake. And I believe it was applied in post, not in Rockstar, because I noticed that the pattern of the shake sometimes would not be broken when there was a camera cut,
Hmm.
meaning that he applied it across multiple clips, right? And okay, maybe it looked too stiff with just all straight shots, but go ahead and take a little time and there's ways to tweak that to where the whole idea of camera shake is that it's supposed to emulate handheld, not that it's supposed to emulate a Leslie organ speaker or something where it's just a sine wave just constantly doing it. So just a thought. It takes a lot more work. I'm not going to lie. It takes a lot more work to emulate real handheld. But if you're going to do it, then that would be my recommendation. So, yeah, this movie is, and its story is reminiscent of. Here's the films that came to my mind as I kind of got a sense of the story. Taken with Liam Neeson,
yes.
Man on Fire with Denzel Washington, John
Yeah.
Wick, definitely.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Most of Steven Seagal's work in the 1980s. Mel Gibson in my favorite role I've ever seen him play, a movie called Payback. These are
Uh-huh.
all a character who's had something taken away from them and they're out to get it back. There's different variations on it, of course, but that's the template.
Mm.
And that story keeps getting retold because there's something about it that really works, that resonates, that people enjoy watching. So, um,
Well, revenge.
and Revenge too, yeah. And those different ones are like sometimes it's more about the recovery of what's lost, and sometimes it's more about the revenge, and sometimes it's a mix of both. So, so I like silent films. I don't mean, old. I mean, I like Charlie Chaplin stuff, but that's not what I mean by silent films, right? I like films that let the visuals do the storytelling, even for part of the film, The opening, I don't know how many minutes it is. I want to say it's like 15 minutes of There Will Be Blood, Oscar-winning film, Daniel Day-Lewis. Opening 15 minutes, not a peep from nobody. And it's I can't take my eyes off the screen. It's the most gripping thing. Um, our introduction to the villain in No Country for Old Men, another Oscar-winning film.
Mm.
Very, very, very little dialogue. The visuals are just doing the storytelling on it. Robert Redford, All Is Lost. If you haven't seen that movie, go see it. Almost, I mean, almost no other characters in the movie either. He's a man that's in a boat, lost at sea, and he's just trying to survive. And so obviously there's no one to talk to. Occasionally he lets out a word here or there, but not much. And of course, Redford was who he was, just a master. And a more recent one that my wife and I just watched a few weeks ago with Mads Mikkelsen. It's called Arctic. That one is on either Netflix or Prime. I don't remember
Mm,
which.
mm,
Similar scenario. He crashes a plane in the Arctic, um, and he's alone and has to figure out how to survive. And it is just brilliant. And there's hardly any talking at all in that, and it's just wonderful. So I have a real appreciation for that, and I love it in Machinima as well. I tend to recommend it to machinima makers for a very practical reason, and that is it instantly can make your film more internationally appetizing
mm,
if language isn't the barrier, you know? So there's obvious benefits to that. Um, that being said, uh, halfway through a 30-minute film before we have any indication of why this person is doing what they're doing, that's just too long to wait. So I'm kind of, Tracy, you said you feel like it's too long. Damien, you said it didn't feel too long. I'm kind of like in the middle.
mm,
I don't think the film was too long for the story, but I
mhm.
think it felt too long because
Yeah.
of some of the decisions about how the story was told. And the big one is that why, we're watching for 15 minutes this man that just because we've stuck with him, we assume that that's who we're supposed to follow and root for, the protagonist, right? And we have to assume that this guy's important because the camera's just wherever he is, right? And he's going around committing acts of violence and murdering people and collecting data for something. But and there are little bits of exposition, like, but they're so vague. They're more about the world building, what the situation is in the world. The opening text, same thing. It's setting up the world, but we don't know why he's doing what he's doing. And that bothered me. That makes it hard to latch on. Now, I'm not saying that there should be some opening exposition dump at the beginning that tells you, here's the guy, here's his mission, here's what he's doing. No, dangle that, stretch that out, but give us something. He looks at a photo of his daughter. Maybe we don't even have to know who it is, but he looks at a photo, or he has a quick flashback of memory and it doesn't have to be on the nose. It doesn't have to be detailed, but just something to give us an indication of, okay, whatever it is he's doing, it has something to do with this thing, this
Mm,
person that he's after. He's looking for somebody. We don't need to know anything else, but to know nothing, that's a big ask, I think, for a movie to just, hey, let's just watch someone kick asses. Uh, uh, there's probably, an appetite for that, but I think that if you look at any of those stories that I referenced before, Taken, doesn't take very long into the movie for us to know why he's
mm,
doing what he's doing, right? We don't know how it's going to turn out, but we know what he's after. Same thing for Man on Fire. Same thing for any of Seagal's stuff. Most of Seagal's, if you've never watched a Steven Seagal movie, pretty much every Steven Seagal movie in the 1980s is his family gets murdered and then he's after who did it. That's it. It's like Taken, but with no survivors, right? So, but at least it's an understandable thing, right? And there's been tons of clones of that story. Mel Gibson in Payback is basically John Wick without any of the almost supernatural layer that John Wick seems to have implicitly. It's something to do with somebody, I don't know, took a very small amount of money from him or something. I can't even remember the premise, but it's established, and this is what he's after, and then he has to go through all this to try and get that back. So, and with this film, I didn't know what this guy was doing or why, and was at a point where I was dangerously close to just not caring and just switching it off, right? That just, okay, so this is just a demo of someone murdering, who cares, you know? So that's the thing, is dangle a little bit of the why early on to give us something
mm,
to go on to where, okay, now we know at least an atom's worth of this guy's motive. that it's not just revenge, because this wasn't just revenge. In fact, it wasn't even primarily revenge. This was a rescue of sorts, you know. So, and if anything, the only it seems like that he was dealing more with guilt than with revenge, as it turns out, as the story ends
Yes.
up revealing,
Yes.
right? So,
Mm.
um, sound-wise, the soundscape, the basics of it were great. The combat sound effects were extraordinary. There's
Mm.
clearly a lot of attention put on those, but no reverb anywhere. Hardly any ambient sounds, nothing that gives a sense of the room or space that he's in. And there should be a little bit of echo if you're in a big space, and things like that I found were lacking. And because there's so much score throughout this movie, I think it's pretty much there's musical score. I think pretty much every moment of the film, right? And so
Mm.
the tendency there is to think, well, I don't need ambient. That's my ambient. But no, in some places you still need it unless the score is really loud and dominant. You need something there to give you a sense of the space. There were moments where he'd put like a little thing and it's like something clattering somewhere I heard once, but that's not enough. You need more there for the immersion. The mix also is very mono.
Mm.
Everything's right in the center.
Mm.
And that's not an awful thing, especially for YouTube. You don't know what sound system someone's using and whatever, but uh, there are moments in the film where there are sounds happening off camera that are relevant to what you're seeing on camera, and they were just panned right to the center. And so if you are watching with stereo speakers or with headphones, that's very confusing. The scene that I'm thinking of in particular is there's a point where there's a guy that's in like it looks like an automotive garage standing in front of a car, and you hear outside muffled sounds of shots and shouting and whatever, and then it culminates with the door breaks open and this guy gets shot. It's just some guy. It's not the
Mm.
main character. Well, all those sounds that were happening, and the character even turns and looks to one side of the screen. So that's where it's coming from, and yet it's coming straight from the center, the
Mm.
same thing as this in the same place that his footsteps are coming from. So panning is helpful, and you don't have to do it for everything. But when the general rule is if the off-camera sound is relevant to what's happening on the screen, you should pan it directionally as if it was happening on screen, so to speak. So that's something that stuck out to me as an I'm a sound nerd. What am I going to say? So also just with general sound effects selection, there was a couple missed opportunities. I feel like the biggest one was there's two different characters that he takes down that end up falling into a molten vat of, I assume it's like metal, right? It's essentially lava, human-made lava, right? And it just kind of sounds like a splash. And
Chip fat.
I feel like that should be a pretty violent and much more
More sizzle.
More
more
sizzle.
sizzle. That's
Yeah.
right. Yes. So there
Yeah.
weren't a lot of those, but there were a couple like
Yeah.
that. So let's talk about story and script. So if you like this type of story, there's a game that's on Steam. It's called Replaced, made by an indie developer called Sad Cat Studios. Just got released in the last month or two. Um, it's this type of story for sure. If you want more of this, that's a great opportunity for that. It's a beautiful game, very kind of a mix of retro modern graphics. It's a 2D scroller, but it's gorgeous. And it's this type of story. So just a quick mention of that. The script on this is excellent. The story is great. And like once you get a picture of exactly what happened in the story, and there's this wonderful kind of a twist and reversal of that happens at the middle, in that middle where the big exposition dump happens, right? Where uh, the the daughter is interacting with the resurrected image of this other guy, and those two are having a conversation while our protagonist sits there, right? You know the scene I'm talking about.
Yes. Yes.
Kind of the pivotal scene of the whole movie. Um, And there's a big reveal there that is like, oh, this isn't quite what I thought. And the only problem with that is that we only just learned of the original what's going on, the original why of why what exactly has happened, and then 2 minutes later we get the reversal. So we didn't even have time to kind of sit and get comfortable with our
Mhm.
first supposition because it was revealed too late. So again, if we'd had just a little indication, think about if he'd just looked at a photo and okay, this is a guy pursuing his daughter. So we get 15 minutes of watching him kick ass while we're thinking about this is the father, you know, to rescue his daughter from someone who did something awful to them. And then we reach the midpoint and find out that he's not innocent in this. Then it would have just been a real gut punch. So anyway,
Yes, yes.
yeah. So that central scene where the exposition finally happens was kind of at last we come up for some air. Again, I was hungry for a why earlier. And then that's where the AI voices really, really let down the side.
Hmm.
Damien and I aren't, we've talked about it many times, and he knows we're not on the same page on this, generally speaking, right? I'm kind of, I waver. Damien's pretty, he's
Yeah,
he's he's settled on his belief, right? And I'm still kind of wavering. But in this case, boy, these just did not do the job. So it's
yeah.
not really about the principle of, for me, it wasn't about the principle of using AI. I say that with respect, Damien, you know that.
Yeah.
But in terms of did it work? No, no, didn't work. Didn't work at all. It's so flat, very plastic. And all I thought about as all of them were talking was, we know people who would have done these roles. Like, I mean, it's that could have just turned this, taken it to a whole other level.
Yes.
Like it just needed human driven performance so bad. And it
Yeah,
felt like such a crime that this is a really good script.
yeah,
It's extremely well written. And the story is wonderful. And the twist in the middle is wonderful. And there's some things I would nudge, but still, it's good ideas, and really well written. Like the dialogue is excellent. And then it
There
just
are,
gets
yeah.
delivered with this robotic. If
yeah.
you didn't notice it was robotic, you'd at least notice it's amateurish, right? It just doesn't, it's just not what people that we know could do. And not to mention, there's thousands of people out there, that are on Discord and in these communities that'll just voice act because they just love doing it. You don't have
Yeah, I
to
was going to say
hire.
the amateur voice actor community, there's so many of them who would love a script like this because it gives them a chance to really show what they can do.
Yeah, this is real stuff. And it's good writing. It's like lines that would be a real pleasure to execute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It feels like they're from real characters with real feelings and real situations. And yeah. And that would have just made the omission of any dialogue, I think any dialogue at all from the main character. I think you're right about that, Tracy. For some reason, when you first said it, I thought, didn't he say a line or something here and there? And maybe he did, but he's
Did he?
mostly silent, right? He's if not completely silent. But
I
that would have
drowned it
made,
out if you did.
yeah, that would have made that so much more like a cool choice if there were other great actors there. And
I agree.
okay, so this is deliberate. This isn't just because I couldn't find a good AI voice for him. This is on purpose. He's silent, completely silent. And we get to ruminate about why he's being so quiet, right? And our thoughts on that change as we learn more about his role in all this, right? So yeah, as a father, that really, really resonated with me. So um, and then in the third, what I'll call the third act of this movie, when the talking basically stops for quite some time, then I find I'm having a really hard time following what's going on at all. And I don't know if I'm just old or I was tired, but I just was really, what's happening now? I think I still know who that is, and who is this? What are these new? What's it really? It got a little too sporadic, and maybe it did go on too long, and that's part of it. But it was just a lot of fisticuffs and sword swings, and running around here and there, and it was harder to track, right? Um, so I feel like sprinkling a little bit of dialogue in that part of it wouldn't have been a bad idea. Because again, there was a sense of uh, once we get the main reveal in the middle of the movie, now to continue following this character, we need a new answer to why. Why is he doing this? Where's he going? What's this about now? And I feel like it kind of got a little bit lost in all
Mm.
the action.
Yeah, me too.
So,
Yeah.
and you're right about the ending. I think you phrased it perfectly. I think I jotted it down here when you said it. Basically, there was a question well raised, but not as well answered. And I think
Yes.
that's really true about the ending. That I got the general sense of what was going on. I appreciated that um, forgiveness wasn't instant and implicit. That's a mistake that movies make a lot. Movies make a lot for the sense of wrapping it up and making it a little happier, right? It'll be like, the if it's a couple that they embrace and laugh and kiss, and you're like, dude, you just lost 12 of your friends. Three of them were beheaded. What are you laughing about? So there
Yeah.
was no sense of that here. There was a sense of, okay, we've made it through this, and this is maybe a new beginning to something, but what happened and what led to this still has a gravity and needs to be dealt with, and that's going to take time. I think that was a very mature
Mm.
aspect of the ending, but it just didn't quite feel as well tailored as that meaty midsection of the story to me. So
Mm.
I liked the movie overall. This is one of those I think that we've run into this many times before, where because there's a certain quality standard that's been met in some areas, it tends to bring out a little bit more criticism, but we do that
Mm.
because it's so good. So I hope
Absolutely.
if the
Yeah.
director's listening to this, he gets the sense of that there's really a lot to admire here. And for me in particular, it's the writing that propels this is wonderful. Just a wonderful, and it doesn't feel, even though the overall template of this type of story is indeed a template, this doesn't feel just derivative, you
Yeah.
know? It doesn't somehow. Um, which means that a new spin has been put to some of these tropes here. And I think
Mm.
that's a good thing. That's
Yeah.
what the creative world needs. So I'll close with one last thing. This is kind of like a little trophy we might hand out at the end of an award ceremony, like a special notice thing, and that is this is a Machinima first, I think. This is the first what I'm going to call a gruesome Cuisinart death that we've ever seen in a Machinima movie, when someone uh, becomes meat spray basically in the blades of a helicopter. I've never seen that in Machinima before,
No,
Oh,
and it was way more gruesome than in Raiders of the Lost Ark for sure. So
it's funny. That was going through my mind when that death scene happened as well.
it was
yeah.
like, whoa. And I just watched Weapons last night, which, good grief,
Hmm.
super, 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 super gruesome.
Bloodthirsty.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. It's a wonderful movie, but my goodness, way, way, way graphic. So yeah, it's anyway, yeah,
Yeah.
great pick, Tracy.
Well, I'm glad you got some good points out of it, really. I was on the edge with this one because, like I said, I felt it had issues. But then I thought, you know what, I do really like what he's done with the story and the ideas. I think, I'd love to see this guy come back and make some more stuff, perhaps with the benefit of our comments taken into consideration. But yeah,
Absolutely.
thanks. Yeah.
Well, audience, what did you think? Drop us a comment wherever you're watching or listening to this, or drop us an email, talk@completelymachinima.com. My name is Phil Rice, and on behalf of my co-hosts, Tracy Harwood and Damien Valentine, and the invisible Ricky Grove, we will see you next time.
Bye.
Cheerio.